I got one.
You can just tap it for your slide.
Okay. All right. I'm glad that y'all are here. I got to pull up my timer, or else I will definitely keep you here longer than you want to be here. So this is for accountability's sake. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're official. As was said, please pick up a poster. My brother designed these. I'm going to give him a shout out from the very beginning. If you'll all look to the back of the room, and Skylar, if you'll raise your hand. The tallest redhead is my brother, Skylar. If you need, I realize that there are as many graphic designers in this room as there are people, but if you're one of the 3 people here who are not a graphic designer and you need graphic design, my brother, Skylar, will be happy to help you out. So, for money though. We're a social enterprise, which means a for-profit business, so he'd be happy to be paid by you. With that said, the theme for this month is risk, something that I'm happy to talk about. And as I was thinking about risk and what qualifies me to talk about risk, this is the first business that I've started. My undergrad was philosophy, and then I actually went to school for ministry, and now I work with wood, because I'm following the way of the master. If I was just going to stand up and say like, oh, risk, I started a company and it happened, like that'd kind of be disingenuous, because maybe if I had started like 8 companies and like 7 of them failed and now I was on the 8th, like then I'd be able to say, and this is how you accept risk as an entrepreneur and make it happen. But the reality for me is I've had it, with this company, like it's been a struggle and a grind, and there have been points at which I had to call my mom and cry, but like big picture, things have gone well company-wise. But when I was thinking about, why can I talk about risk? I think primarily in my life, it's because before I found the woman that I married, I had only ever been shot down a lot. So when I think about risk primarily in my life, I've asked a lot of women out, been told no a lot of times, and then like there were the few where it's like, oh, we get several dates in or a couple months in, and they're like, yeah, this isn't working. I'm like, are you sure? We can talk about it. They're like, and because I'm a Christian, you get like the Holy Spirit told me. Well, he didn't tell me. And so, So when I'm talking about risk this morning, I don't want you to hear just in regards to entrepreneurship or just in regards to business. As I'm talking this morning, I hope that what I have to say is applicable broader than business or vocational decisions, but can really apply to whether it is you want to ask out somebody you saw at barista parlor, which you probably shouldn't. Or that's not a statement on barista parlor. They're great. Just don't be the creepy coffee person. Or whether it's a career move, whether it's going back to school, whatever it is, I hope that what we talk about this morning can be broadly applied to whatever your situation is. So I'm going to give just a little background on how we got started, my company, and how this thing got going. I can't say got rolling because now that I own a skateboard company, it just feels way too contrived. So we started Salemtown Board Co. Myself and a buddy of mine who's no longer with the company, we started in 2012 in the Salemtown neighborhood. Sometimes people are like, you're not in Salemtown. I'm like, yes, I'm aware. But we started this company in the Salemtown neighborhood in 2012. And at the time when I moved to Salemtown, I had just finished up seminary in the Boston area. While I was in seminary, I was doing social work. Specifically, I was working with broadly young men that fell into the category of at risk. Some of them were on the spectrum. Some of them just had different issues that came from more nurture than nature. And so being I don't know if you know this, but there's not a lot of men in social work. And so when somebody who's 6'2", 250 walks in the doors, the new employee, they're like, let's give him everyone that might be violent. And so those were the cases that I got. And if I'm being honest, I loved it. Probably because I have a hero complex, probably because, I don't know, they're like, you might have to wrestle someone. And I'm like, and you're gonna pay me. And so I loved working with these young men, and the more that I worked with the young men in the Boston area, the more that I saw that there were gaps. There were gaps in the systems that we've created for people that don't fit in all the molds. And so when I moved to Nashville, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to work with young men that were falling out of the system. And so I knew that I wanted to move to a neighborhood where I'd find those young men who were falling out of the system. And so at the time, in 2012, I didn't have a concept for what gentrification meant. I didn't know really anything about economics. I didn't know about economics and race. I didn't know about, there were all these things that I didn't know about, but I knew that there was a lot of gang activity. I knew that there was a lot of drug dealing. I knew that there was a lot of violence. I knew that, unfortunately, there was and continues to be a lot of prostitution in that neighborhood, and I felt like, if I'm going to make a difference in the lives of anybody, I want to be with and among the people that I want to help out. And so moved in totally ignorant but well-intentioned, and as I got to know the young men in the neighborhood, I just started asking questions, and what I saw is I've worked in after-school programs, I've done nonprofit work, I've done ministry work, I've done, as I said, social work, and yet as I got to know these men, I saw that there was a gap between either high school or after they dropped out of high school and work. I don't know about you guys, but the day before I got my first job, I understood that there were lots of jobs that were beneath me. And as terrible as that sounds, like as a 17-year-old, Will Anderson growing up in Central Florida, that was true. There were lots of jobs that I thought I don't want to work at Wendy's. I'm not yes, I believe that I can just show up at Walmart and get a job. I don't want to do that. I know that I can probably get a job working lawn care. I really don't want to do that in Florida. There were all these jobs that having never worked a day in my life, having never, I didn't have a resume, but because of the life that I lived, and the network that I was born into, I was able to show up at businesses feeling like I'm qualified to work here. You should hire me. And as I got to know these young men in my neighborhood, I started to see they didn't have that ability. And that became very true. That stood out as the ways that I've understood the world. And the way that I understood things was, if you see a young person without a job, he needs to get his crap together and just go get one. And so I had spent the majority of my life looking down on young men who weren't working and just said, well, the problem is, you just need to go work. And the more that I got to know these young men, and the more that I got to know their families, and the more that I got to know their school systems, and the more that I got to know all of the different systems around them, the more I saw that a lot of the assumptions that I had about why they were failing, which I just wanted to tie to the fact well, if they would just fill in the blank, that it was much more complicated than that. And I don't know about you, but I feel accountable to what I know to be true. If I decide that something is true, I'm now accountable to that truth. I can't just close my eyes and pretend like I don't know that now. If something shows up in my life that goes from, that affects how I live, I have to make a change, or else it's just going to sit in the back of my mind and I'm going to feel like a hypocrite every day. And so as somebody who had moved to the neighborhood and wanted to do something helpful, whether it was sitting down with the grandmothers that would hang out on the porch, whether it was meet with local pastors and say, what's going on here? How can I help? What I heard over and over and over and over again is there's a need for stuff to do, but there's also a need for employment. And so what I at the time felt convicted about and now believe very robustly is that the gap that I was feeling is that for many, these young men who statistically the gap between in the fourth quarter of 2015, the 2016 numbers were just published, and it's about the same, but for black men, the rate of unemployment is twice as high than that of white men. And so that led me to ask the question, okay, is it because just fundamentally black people just don't like to work? Like, are white people just statistically better? Or is there a broken system? And I hope most of us, upon hearing that, would say like, oh yeah, obviously it's a broken system. And so when I looked at that, I said, okay, there is a broken system that these young men are inheriting. And so the way that I can help is by creating jobs. Yes, there are social services available. Yes, there are after school programs available. Yes, there are tutoring services available. But at some point, if we're going to see young people be responsible for themselves, they have to become the primary drivers in their own success. And so the way that I understand to do that is through business. As long as you're running a nonprofit and helping people, that's great if it's a bridge to somewhere. As long as we're providing social services, that's great if it's seasonal and helping people move from one place to another. I'm not anti-social work, I'm not anti-nonprofit. They have a place, but if the client-based relationship of being served by a nonprofit or a social service becomes a station in which a family exists for generations, I think the system's broken and we need something else. And I really think that something else is business. And so I believe that I'm accountable to that truth. And so when it comes to how I run my business, very simply, I'm doing something I love. I love woodworking. I've grown up doing board sports. I love skateboarding. I love the culture around it. It's been a place that has been home for me for the most of my life. And so as I set out to start a business, the question that I want to ask is, how do I take the things that I love, the things that I most enjoy doing, and use it in such a way where it's for a benefit for my community? How do I use the things that I love while still being true and accountable to the things that I know to be truth? And if in 2016 America, if the statistics say that statistically white people are outpacing black people when it comes to incarceration, when it comes to education, when it comes to employment, when it comes to everything set aside professional sports, I am accountable as somebody who has been on the benefiting side of these systems to say, what can I do about it? I think everybody in this room has heard the term white guilt. I don't think white guilt fixes anything. If you have white guilt and you go home and you feel white guilty, I don't care if you can go home, feel white guilty, write a blog, you haven't solved anything. I can say 100%, I don't feel white guilty. And none of my neighbors want me to. Because me just feeling bad isn't going to cause solutions. What does cause solutions is say, if this is true, and this is where we are in 2016, what can we do to make things better? And I honestly 100% believe that solutions that invite everybody in and aren't the goal isn't to make anybody feel bad, because that's what we see on TV. We all want to say okay, where can we assign the blame for our problems? Instead of saying, where do we assign blame, how do we all look and just say, okay, this is what it is. This is what is true. This is where we are. How do we take steps forward that's actually good for everyone? And so when we started the company and as we continue the company, that's a big part of who we are, is just asking what is true. So whether it's whether you're looking at taking a leap, whether it's starting a business, whether it's starting a relationship, whether it's starting schooling, whatever the fork in the road is for you, if you're going to take a risk, the first question that you have to ask is okay, what's truth here? Because I think most of us, when we think about risk, we just get caught up on what if I fail? And we get so hung up on what if I fail that we don't even take the time to examine the whole situation. So the next question that I want to ask is, what's the alternative? For myself, when it came to starting this business, what's the alternative? I can either take the risk of starting a business, doing something that I love, the way that I want to do it, in a way that's beneficial not only for myself, but for my community. Or, I don't know, like I applied at like a moving company. Like, I'm really glad that didn't pan out. And when you start to ask the question, what's the alternative? Suddenly, like, failure doesn't seem that bad. Because sometimes when we ask, what's the alternative? The alternative to taking this risk, sometimes that starts to sound a lot like what the failure that we were afraid of sounds like. You know, if 18 months from now, my company goes under, you know, hey, it was a great idea, we had a good run, it was a lot of fun, it just didn't pan out. Like, does that mean that I'm a failure? No, like, I've been able to learn so much. I've been able to build relationships. You know, I've been able to, you know, I've had employees that were able to use the opportunities that we created here to benefit themselves, to benefit their futures. Like, it was a win. Like, failure really isn't that bad. Like, the alternative of like, I just didn't do it because it was scary. Like, in my mind, that's so much more terrifying and so much more of like a failure than like doing it, hey, you know, long-term didn't work out, but it was a good run. Like, that's much more terrifying, sitting around and asking for the rest of my life, like, what if? You know, I wish I had. That's so much more scary than just saying, hey, I tried to do the thing that I wanted to do the way that I wanted to do it. And this time around, it didn't pan out. But that's fine. Like, you know, this is where, you know, I could insert, you know, XYZ sports metaphor of Michael Jordan took X number of shots. I thought about looking that up. I was like, none of these people care. But if you do care, insert a Wayne Gretzky quote. Something that I've had to learn is that struggle doesn't equal failure. Right now, being an entrepreneur, it's sexy, but it's also scary, because when you pick up a Forbes magazine and you open the cover and you see like, oh, here's this 19-year-old kid who had an idea, and then an angel investor gave him $4 billion, and now he owns 8 yachts. And like, you look at that and you're like, oh man, like, I'm living at my mom's house. Like, and you know, I think it's easy to believe in this day and age when we look out and we see, you know, the entrepreneurship is sexy right now. We see lots of people that are killing it. Like, personally, I know there's a couple of these solo people here. It's intimidating to be on the street where they're like, yeah, you know, we're just blowing up like 300% every week, and, you know, it's just a real struggle for us. And I'm like, yeah, I'll pray for you. Like, there, you know, even here in Nashville, like, there's people that are blowing up and killing it, and I'm like, man, I hope I make enough money this week where it's not awkward with my wife. Like, and the thing is, like, I think so many of us, we have, you know, when we're looking at risk, whatever the risk is, we have a destination in mind, and we think if we can just get to the destination, then we did it. I want to encourage you and say, like, whatever you're in, you know, whatever you're struggling through, don't think that struggle is failure. Because even for those of us, you know, whether you're totally killing it, or whether you're struggling and grinding and you're just doing what you need to do to make it happen day in and day out, and like, it seems like, man, when am I going to get to that point where I just coast? Everybody that I look to as a mentor in the business world has never reached that point. You don't get to success is not a destination. Like, the most fulfilled people that I know are also the most hungry people that I know. Because they're overjoyed with the ability to get to do what it is that they want to do the way that they want to do it, but they also understand that, like, you never fully get there. That doesn't mean that you spend your life being discontent, but it does mean that you spend your life never fully being satisfied, because, like, as soon as you get to whatever success looks like as a point in the sand, you have to draw a new point. You have to say, like, okay, I did it. Yes, like, we have a building. I mean, I have like my own like JV version of like Rob Dyrdek's Fantasy Factory. Like, I haven't made it because, like, I have to pay rent next month. You know, I have to pay rent a year from now. Like, I want to buy a house. Like, just because you get to a point, it doesn't mean that you're done. And so when you think about, like, risk is not a season before you jump, but rather like risk is a continuing thing where if you're going to do what you want to do the way that you want to do it, you're just going to have to keep working, you're going to have to keep grinding, and like that feeling of like, uh-oh, everything may fall apart. Like you don't get to a point where that just disappears. I mean, I know that there's a few freaks out there, as I said, like who, they have the idea, they get the angel investing, like everything plays out and everything's fine, but like that's not normal. Like the majority of us who want to do what we want to do the way that we want to do it, like that has to be enough. Like if you don't make enough money to be super rich and drive the car that you want to drive and do all the things that you want to do, like is it enough that you get to show up on Monday morning and like do what you want to do? Like, is it enough that like, if it's education, is it enough that you get to show up and learn that? Yeah, like what is enough? And I would challenge you, like, think about really critically, like what is success? Because what you'll find is that on the other side of risk is usually more risk. It's a daily, you wake up and yes, you decide like, am I gonna do it? And then every day you have to wake up and like keep answering that question. Am I gonna do it? Is it worth it? What is true? What is the alternative? And then finally, risk is the cost of success. Every business has overhead and risk is one of those things. If you're a freelancer, if you're an entrepreneur, you know this. My like feeling of risk lives in the area where my upper abs would be if I had those. Like there are plenty of days where it's like I just carry it. Like there have literally been days I'm sitting on the couch, I'm like, did I do an ab workout or am I stressed? Because I just feel it right there. And many of you who are freelancers, many of those of you who have decided I'm going to do the thing that I want the way I want to do it, like you know that feeling. Maybe you don't carry it there, maybe you carry it somewhere else, but I wonder if I have adrenal fatigue. I'll address that later. But like, we can, like, like you just carry it. And like, I don't know if there's a point that you get beyond it. I realize that like it'd be easy for some of you guys who are deciding like, hey, or wrestling through like, should I do the thing that I want to do? Like it'd be easy to look at me and say, hey, we're sitting in your building, like you have a wood shop full of the tools you want, and a skate park that you designed, and a retail space full of stuff you made, and like, that's cool for you. You did it, but like, I don't know if I've ever reached the point where I've done it. And I would also encourage you, like if you can have, like if your big goals are that easily accomplished, like you need bigger goals. Like I have no problem saying that as a for-profit company, I want to make millions of dollars. It's not because I honestly think that like some car is going to satisfy some deep hunger within me, but it's because the more money I make, the more money I have in payroll, the more people that I can hire. I would love to be able to have 5 full-time salaried positions that don't bring in any income. I would love to be able to hire 5 people full-time and just teach them how to work. Like, in my mind, like that is success. I would love to be able to do that. And so, and this is just a little extra thing, but like I would encourage you when you're thinking through like what is worth risking for, what is worth like going out on the limb for, you got to find something that's bigger than yourself. I can reason myself into giving up on myself much more quickly than I can give up on other people. There have been multiple times in the history of my company, like as I said, like I remember like, yeah, being like, I'm 29 now, like being like 26 and like calling my mom, just like crying and being like, it's not happening, we're not making enough money, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills. But, like for most people, like if you're a 26-year-old guy crying to your mother on the phone, it's like, oh, I think we walk away now. But like for me, like that wasn't even an option. Like I had these young men that I told, we're going to, if you're willing to work, we're willing to help. Like every time that I hire a new employee, I sit them down and I say, in the world that I grew up in, life is a bike race. And I was born onto a brand new bike with a support staff and nutritional consultants and sponsors and everything that I needed to do this race well. Guess what? We're in the same race. And you got a rusty Schwinn with 2 flat tires. said, but through this business, I can, we can get you the sponsorship, we can get you, everything that you need to compete, but I can't pedal for you. And so when these young men, I'd start to see them pedal. I had one young man, I literally cried at 5 o'clock when I said, okay, you have to go. And he refused to go home because he wasn't done working. And I'm like, no, I'm your boss, you're done. And he's like, no, this isn't finished. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid gets it. He's gonna be fine. His sense of hard work won't let him leave because he knows in his own mind he's not done with the work. I can't, when people want to come in and tell stories about who we are, I'm constantly trying to say, hey, this is way less sexy than the story you want to tell. We're not, we're not The Blind Side, we're not but that's the story that everybody wants to tell. They want to come in and they'd be like, oh, look at this brave white guy who's coming in and fixing these poor black kids. I can't fix anybody. And even if I wanted to, I don't have the emotional energy to put that on my shoulders. All I can do is create opportunities that those young men either use or they throw away. That's all I can do. And when I've been able to see some young men take those opportunities and use it, and be able to do things that they wouldn't they wouldn't have had those opportunities, they wouldn't have had those connections, they wouldn't have had that networking, if we weren't able to connect the dots. But as I said, I can't pedal for them. And so for me, having my employees, having these people that are counting on me, that I've said, if you're willing to pedal, I'm willing to sponsor. If you're willing to push, I'm willing to help you get as far as you're willing to push. For me, that has meant at points where it's okay, do we walk away? No, I can't walk away. Failure is not a hard line. Failure is when you're ready to walk away. And so I would encourage you, what is it in your life that you're willing to pass those thresholds where everyone else would say, yeah, you're probably done. And where you're willing to say no, I can't. I can't give up. I'm accountable to what I know to be true, and I can't be finished here, because I haven't done what I set out to do. I haven't fulfilled my promises, and I know that it's going to be a struggle every day. And so I want to encourage you and say, hey, if you're struggling, we all are, much more than it appears on Instagram, and that's okay, because for the vast majority of us, success is going to be a slow grind. For the vast majority of us, the risk, we're going to carry it somewhere in our midsection for a long time. And that's okay, because I know for myself, I turned 30 this year, and to be able to be a 30-year-old that does what I want the way that I do it, in a way where I have neighbors I've never met just come up and say, hey, I'm thankful for you. That's worth it. For me, that risk is so worth it. And so, yeah, I'm really bad at knowing how to land the plane. So that's what I have. I'm thankful that you're here. If you have any questions, if you want to clap. All right, if there's any questions. Yeah.
I think I saw you first on CBS Sunday mornings.
Yes,
How
I
did
did.
that show impact your business? Or did it?
Yeah, it was really helpful. It broadened our network a lot, in terms of we had lots of people call and reach out. It allowed me to hire my younger brother, so that was good. Yeah.
How did they find you?
Knowing someone who knew somebody who brought it up in a meeting. So, yeah, this one's for free. Don't network, make friends. I know that can sound cheesy, but in all seriousness, we all know when somebody is just having that conversation, oh, what are the things that you can give me? Anybody that has been able to forward us in terms of networking have been people that we've invested in. And I love being able to use my platform to help out other talented people. And yeah, so that's a freebie. Anything else? I was promised y'all would ask questions. So
It always takes a minute.
yeah,
How is your business organized in terms of
we're an LLC.
but in terms of employee structure?
Okay, there's my brother and I, and we're the full-time people, and then there are, we tried to hire around like sophomore year of high school, and then so we bring in at $8.50 an hour, and then there's like different ways to work up to 10 based off of performance and like different like test type things where they can earn up. I tell people that like my big goal, you know, if you've read Good, I think it's Good to Great, where he talks about the BHAG, you know, your big, hairy, audacious goal. Ours is to be self-replicating, and that like I'm not arrogant enough to think that I'm going to cause any amount of significant change in a historically low-income Black neighborhood. And so like our goal is to ask the question, how can we provide a context and that maybe we can mentor a young man who can? How do we get the young men who work here to love this neighborhood so much more than we do? Because it's them who are going to be able to turn around and serve the neighborhood in ways that we can't. And so when we structure, like from day one when a young man comes in, I interviewed a guy yesterday, and like in his interview I said, like we say, you know, this is not a long-term thing. You're here for a season, and like part of working for us is trying to reverse engineer success for you. So, you know, whether it's working on a housing crew in Williamson County, whether it's going to college, whether it's playing, you know, going to college for, we have a young man who's at TSU right now doing computer science, or whether it's, you know, the guy I interviewed yesterday wants to play college football. Okay, so like, what do we do to like help you get there? Let's set up meetings with coaches. You know, let's talk with academic advisors. Let's do everything that we can to get you where you want to go. But it's also very much, yeah, we tell them like we're the first line on your resume, and like with the goal that there will be a second line from day one.
When did you decide that you needed like a workshop like this, like a commercial space?
So when we started in Salemtown, we had kind of everything under one roof, and that just didn't work. Like we needed a place where we could paint where there wasn't sawdust. We needed a small retail space. Like people would come by, and we like had a sketchy trailer with like the name of a band that no longer exists on the side, and we'd like that's how we would sell stuff to people. And so it was just like a natural growth where we got to the point where it was worth it to take the overhead of a physical location for the sake of the growth of the business.
How do you find the guys who work for you? Like, how do you?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. It's a mix of, part of it is my wife and I live here in the neighborhood, and so something that I love about living in a neighborhood like this is like I'm constantly trying to tell people like I don't sacrifice to live here. Like I'd rather live here than Sylvan Park. I would rather live here than like, you know, whatever, you know, some cool neighborhood is. Like in that, like in this neighborhood, I know my neighbors and my neighbors know me. I give my wife a hard time because like she's working on her PhD at Vanderbilt, and she's had me pick her up because like in a place because she didn't want to walk through campus because she doesn't feel safe. And yet like we go on walks at dark in statistically the most dangerous place in Nashville. But like living out here, what you learn is that unfortunately, you know, there's thousands of people that live in this neighborhood. And I tell people regularly, there's 30 assholes shooting each other, but the whole community gets to carry the weight of those few. And so like the beauty of this neighborhood is that there is such a strong, rich community. Like people hang out on their front porch. You can walk, like I've lived here, I live in the house we're living now, we've lived a year. Like we walked around the corner last night and met like 3 new neighbors. And then like stood outside till like 9 o'clock just talking with people who just want to talk. And it was just an average Thursday. There wasn't an event or anything. And so like in a neighborhood like this, there's such a strong sense of community that it's just being a part of the community, just being visible. Unfortunately, a lot of people that look like the average member of this room, when we move into neighborhoods like this, you know, we move in with kind of an early adopter mindset, and I refer to those people as taking the He is Legend, or the I am Legend approach. If you understand who He is Legend is, shout out. If you, yeah, so like some move in with like like they treat their neighbors like zombies, And so like we moved in from day one, we're like, no, like these are people. The vast majority of them are doing, like they're doing the best they can with what they have. They go to work, some of them are working multiple jobs. And so like we moved in day one, we're like, we want to get to know our neighbors. And so whether, when I was living in Salemtown, it was just, I'm gonna get to know my neighbors, which means I'm gonna go to where my neighbors are. I'm gonna be the awkward white dude. And what I've learned is like, my neighbors are so gracious with me is that like, by and large, white people are so much more awkward about race than black people are. And I think a lot of that is because like I never had to ask myself the question, what does it mean to be white, until my late 20s, where like, if you grow up as a minority in America, like you're processing that, like that's the context in which you live. And so like, we feel awkward because like, oh man, I'm almost, I'm in my mid 20s and like, I feel, I've never been a minority. Like I would guess to say most of the people in this room, like it's very rare that you're a minority. And yet and I don't say that in a condemning way, it's just like, this is the world we live in. And so like we've made an effort to purposely put ourselves in that situation. Like go to churches on Sunday morning where we're the only white people that show up, and like, it's awesome and everybody's so welcoming. And so by purposely putting ourselves in situations where we are the minority, by purposely putting ourselves in situations where we get to know our neighbors and hear our neighbors and listen to our neighbors, you just get to know people. And then at that point, it happens really naturally. And it's a lot easier because like, it's not just having some kid walk in, but it's like, his aunts, his cousins, his grandmama, his uncle, you know the community in which they come from, and that it's a lot harder to pick up a kid that has all sorts of, nasty baggage when like, exactly who you're hiring because his extended family, and like you see how he interacts with his friends, you see how he treats, the girls he hangs out with, and so like just being a part of the community has made that process like very easy.
We got time for one or two more, I would think.
Yeah.
What's a typical work day look like here?
Gosh, it totally depends on the flow of the week. So like, the young men that we hire, they're all in high school. And so if we have, early on in the company, we had them do a lot more of the woodworking. And then we had a couple texting while sawing incidents. Yeah. This kid, he nicks his finger. Fortunately, it wasn't that bad. Like, everyone still has all their digits. So this kid is texting on the bandsaw, which like a bandsaw in itself isn't that dangerous because the blade is right there. As long as like you don't put a finger in the blade, you're fine. You don't get much kickback. Relatively, it's a safe saw. But he was texting somebody while, and so we take him to urgent care, and he's like, I don't want to go to urgent care. And we're like, well, why not? He's like, no, take me to Vanderbilt. And we're like, no, we're going to urgent care. You need like maybe a stitch. And he really wanted to be put under because he was terrified by the idea of having to be awake while getting stitches. I'm like, you realize that if we take you to Vanderbilt, they're not going to put you under. So we have them do, the young men who work for us, they do assembly, they do most of our sanding. They do assembly, sanding, they'll do like janitorial stuff. They'll do all of our like shipping and receiving stuff. And so most of that they do in the afternoons. They get off school at 2:45. During the day, it'll be a mix of, like on an average day, we'll probably do some woodworking in the morning, make up what we need to make, and then spend the afternoon doing like running the business, sending emails, reaching out to sales contacts, stuff like that. So there was a season in life in which I worked at J. Crew and like all my clothing was nice, and now like everything I own has like, it looks like it has a really bad Instagram filter on it because it's just covered in sawdust. And so like it makes my wife sad because it's like there's all these nice clothes that just, those stay in the attic. I'm gonna wear t-shirts and sawdust covered jeans. But so like most days it's spending a little time in the workshop and then a little time on the computer. And then what we try to do is with the young men, like we only want to, like we don't want to hover more than we need to. And so like we want them to be able to work by themselves as much as possible. Something that's really important is we are, like as I said, like we're a business, we're not a 501c3. And so, if you look at our social media, if you look at how we, if you go and look at, on our website, like we'll talk about the fact that we're a social enterprise, but like that's not our marketing. Partially because my demographic doesn't really care, but also because like the way that I bring most dignity to these young men is by setting our goal as how do we make the best product possible, and by having that be our marketing. We make skateboards. We are kind of aimed at people who want to get out of town and go to the mountains for a weekend and here take a board with you. Like that's kind of the vibe that we're going for, and we feel like we bring them the most dignity by not being the Toms of skateboarding, but by having a company, inviting them in to be a team member, and so like it looks like an employee coming in doing their work. It doesn't look like an after-school program because, we don't want them, because they're not projects. Like we're giving them opportunities to better themselves, and so they'll come in, and most of the time it's pretty hands-off. If they need help, we'll ask for help. But that's how a general day goes. Yeah.
Do you work with men exclusively?
Yes. I work with men exclusively simply because I can't imagine a situation in which myself and my brother are alone in a building with girls that are minors and it not be sketchy. So, that's another question we get a lot. Like, it's just as simple as like, that's just liability I don't want to deal with. Like we work one-on-one with a lot of guys behind closed doors, and frankly, like I don't have the money to like hire a full-time female employee just to be there so that I can hire women. Generally, when I get that question, the first thing I want to do is just say like, I would be more than excited for someone to move to this neighborhood, start a social enterprise, and hire a bunch of these women. If you want to do that, please. I prefer you don't make skateboards. But yes, if you have an idea of something you want to make, like right now, I think there is incredible opportunity with the maker movement. Like there's a lot of people like me who have philosophy degrees who are now doing woodworking stuff. There's lots of jobs that are exploding that are entry-level jobs that people can learn to work with their hands. And how awesome would it be? We're constantly using the term New Nashville. How do we use the explosion of those entry-level jobs to be for the benefit of the people that lived here before it was cool? And so that's something that, that's a question that we're asking regularly. And yes, if there is a North Nashville whatever co, and y'all are moving here and hiring young women, that would be awesome. So yeah, it's just as simple as I just don't want to be alone with 16-year-old girls.
All right, well that's where we're going to leave it.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Good.
Really